What's working, folks? I'm Cam Marston. This is the special edition version, the Tuesday, Thursday versions at 1 p.m. brought to you by Regions. I want to thank you for tuning in again. I think we're into the fifth, maybe sixth week of doing this now. I'm losing count, and I feel a very distinct shift in the conversations that I'm having as I'm organizing content for this show. And the shift, I think, is very good. It's very positive for us small business owners out there. It's more into strategic thinking about what's coming and how to react to what's coming than about triage and how to staunch the flow of blood. And I think that's reflective across the nation as I'm talking to different people in different industries. They are thinking, and I've had this question more recently than I've had in the past 5 or 6 weeks, how do I build market share in this time? How do you should never lose the opportunity to take advantage of a tragedy or something like that, but how do I build market share? And we're going to talk a little bit about that in today's show through a different way, and I'll tell you about what's coming in a moment. First guest up is going to be Patty Vanderpool. She's the CEO of EAP Lifestyle Management. It's employee assistant program. They are contracted to companies to come in and help in times of crisis, as well as many other training and development needs. But she emailed me. I want to compliment her, and I'll do it again when I get her on the line. She emailed me after hearing one of the shows and says, hey, I think there's something that you haven't yet touched on that needs to be brought forward, and that is fear. And we've talked about that through a couple of different angles, but what she's referring to is as these businesses begin to open, there are employees out there that are truly afraid of coming back to work. They're afraid that the job may not exist when they get there, or they'll get there a short amount of time and the job will go away, or more logically, they're afraid of the disease that they could catch now interacting with people that had once been colleagues, but now we have to look at it with a little bit of cautious suspicion. Fear. How do we deal with the fear of coming back to work, and how do employers have to recognize that that's now part of the landscape? We'll next listen to Bill Kleinschrodt. Bill is a business, works selling businesses, buying or brokering businesses is the right way to say it. And there's a large amount of cash, he tells me, sitting on the sidelines right now, waiting for businesses to come for sale. This is a business buying market. And if you've ever been thinking about maybe I should get out of what I've been doing and buy a small business, now's the time, says Bill, because there's a lot of people that have evaluated their lives, their goals, and are now either eager to get into a business. Similar conversations that have led people to say, I'm ready to get out of this business. So we are going to see some business transactions here soon, not Wall Street types of things, but things that you and I would want to know about in our community. Now, both Patty and Bill have supplied me with really good content if you're interested in getting this. Patty's content is about managing the fear in the workplace from the employer point of view, and Bill has offered me a link to the businesses that are currently for sale in our area. And the way to get that content is through the text service. I advertise this each time. That number is 44222. Here's what you do. You enter what's working and text it to 44222. You're going to get a list of the businesses, or actually a link, and the document that Patty has prepared for us. And I want to remind you about our Instagram and our Facebook page. We keep these things up to date. We want people to know what's going on. Now, the other iteration of this show is the Wednesday night, 6 p.m. Tuesday, Thursday, 1 p.m., live broadcast for small business. Wednesday night, 6 p.m. is about the businesses that we feature. And we got a really, really interesting, and I would say almost strange organization. This is Third Realm Creations coming up tomorrow night. Augmented reality and virtual reality. Remember, at Warp 152 this afternoon, we recap the best ideas that you'll hear on the show. And then immediately after the recap, I'll have Jeff Roberts with Yellowhammer Coffee. They've done okay during this time of crisis, and we're going to get some words of encouragement from him at that time. Folks, you're listening to What's Working with Cam Marston Special Edition, brought to you by Regions. We'll be back with Patty after this break. Patty Vanderpool is the CEO and owner of EAP Lifestyle Management. They're contracted by employers to provide mental health, workplace training, and critical incident response. Headquartered in Daphne, Alabama, with offices throughout the state, also in Pensacola, New Orleans, and I love these last two, Aruba and Curacao. Sounds like a boondoggle to me, but if it works, it works. Patty, thank you so much. Welcome to What's Working.
Thank you very much, Cam. Appreciate your having me.
You know what? One of these things that leaps out is New Orleans in your list of offices. And you and I, prior to getting on the air here, spoke yesterday, or maybe it was today. I forget. It's all running together. New Orleans was a little bit of a leading indicator in a lot of the disease and the COVID information, and they were hit hard. And their reaction or their rebound has been a little bit in front of ours here in Mobile, and they've begun asking you questions. Your clients there have begun asking you questions that are perhaps foretelling of what's coming here, mostly around fear. Can you elaborate on that for me?
They're concerned, Cam, this is a federal agency, and they're very concerned when people come back to work that they have a whole host of things they've dealt with on their own, of course, in their personal lives, work aside, which impacts their ability to work. For example, there are several teammates there who have experienced loss due to COVID. Some of them still have sick family members. And then there's the issue of productivity. How do we get back to work? How do we feel good about being with other people? You know, their terminology was they're concerned about workplace jitters. So we're getting so many requests for how to prepare the workplace for this return to work.
So your advice to them is not format or the layout of the workplace and how to space people appropriately in the workplace. Even though they were workplace colleagues 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, now we're spacing them out. Your approach to them is more psychological. Here's how to prepare yourself for coming back to work. And if I understand you correctly, these are not the managers or the supervisors. These are the managers and supervisors who are asking the question on how to help the employees. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. And one thing we have to stress is they've got to take care of themselves. That means you really can. The basics with mental health start with self-care. So got to make sure they're eating right, got to make sure they're sleeping right, exercising, drink plenty of water. That is actually a very important first step to your mental health. It's only a first step, but it's a big one. You know, how are you gonna be your best? How are you going to communicate as a leader should if you're dealing with your own multiple stressors and sleep deprivation? So we really focus on self-care first.
So imagine me, and I'm an employee of one of these locations in New Orleans that you're working with, or perhaps anywhere here in South Alabama, and I am in your care or on the phone with you, and I say, Patty, I don't know. I'm just kind of afraid to go back to work. I don't know what the situation is going to be like when I get there. I don't know if I'm going to have a job for a day or two with everything I read. And it could be that my colleague is sick, and I wouldn't know about it the way this disease hides itself. Coach me through that process.
You know, that kind of depends. Are you a leader or an hourly employee? I'm sorry, I didn't catch the beginning of it. And there really is somewhat of a difference with the responsibilities you have, and that means legal responsibilities as well. Stigma. You touched on something that's very important. I'm afraid that workplaces are going to be experiencing stigma against coworkers who may have a family member who's been impacted, or they themselves have been impacted. So how we feel about somebody, very often when I do training, I talk about how we feel is often driven, almost always driven by the thoughts we're having. So then we have to talk about, let's build up your brain. Let's build up your resilience. How do you do that? Well, and I think, again, Cam, this is another big problem. It's uncertainty. Everybody is scared when they're not certain what tomorrow is going to look like. So our worlds were pretty well shaken. There's not much we can do. I am all for the behavioral fixes first. Look at your world. What can you do to fix it? And if there is no behavioral effect, like distancing yourself, there's only so much you can do, then what? Then how do I conquer the fear? There are certain behaviors you can engage in that will help your level of fear. Giving to others is one. changing your thinking, and that is much more difficult than changing your behavior.
I find that to be true all the time. Changing the thinking, I've got such a very comfortable habit and pattern of thinking that changing thinking is very difficult. But I want to let you ask a question. I want to pursue the question as if I'm one of the managers or leaders
Okay.
or supervisors, and I have a team that now, according to the governor of the state of Alabama, can begin coming back to work. I think it's Thursday or Friday morning, let's say. Thursday evening, Friday morning. And I'm now reaching out to that team saying, hey, it's go time. We've all wanted it to get back to normal. It's go time. And my attitude could be, and I'll tell you what my attitude would be, it's go time. Everybody get back and double up on the work that you've been doing. It's time to catch up and throw yourself into it. Now, my attitude is not conducive to somebody who's afraid to come back to work. In fact, I would probably be hindering that person's ability to work if I look at them and say, it's go time. Get started. What should my attitude be? How do I coach this individual to come on back to work and feel like it's safe?
Well, of course, let me tell you my obvious answer. If you have an EAP, you call us and we'll help you with that. We'll coach everybody on an individual basis.
Yes.
And I'm not trying to avoid answering the question, but basically, Cam, you've got 3 steps to be for any of us to be effective at what we're doing. First is self-care, the second are behavioral interventions, and that might mean we can't get all caught up at once. That might be there's going to be some delays in deadline. And again, it's as simple as, if you're sleep deprived and if you're engaged in too many tasks as a leader or worker, then you're not going to be effective at what you're doing.
So I'm coaching them. I'm coaching myself first and going through this checklist and then encouraging them and assuring them of safety, perhaps, and showing them this is what we've done to make the workspace physically safe for you, and the cleansers and the distancing, etc. Let's talk about the stigma, and that's a word that you mentioned a little bit earlier. Let's assume that my colleagues in the workplace. Now, let's put me in the role of somebody that is one of the frontline employees.
Yep.
And I had a major illness at some point. I was diagnosed positive for COVID, hypothetically. And I recognize I'm going to be coming back to work and there's going to be a stigma on me. My colleagues that used to want to have lunch with me are going to avoid me. How do I, as a person that carries this stigma, deal with that in my workplace?
So my first comment would be a good consumer of the information that's out there. Let's, not, what were they saying, drink bleach and, be good consumers. Choose your source for the information and the standards, CDC, et cetera, et cetera. And really, we all have to check our own moods too, both as a leader and as a frontline worker or a back office worker. Moods are contagious. So, and it's so easy to demonstrate. If you walk into a room and everybody is just not having a good day, you might be having the best day in the world, but it's not going to last because moods are contagious, and that in turn drives your behavior. So then we still get back to let's change how you're thinking about that. It's a very real concern to be concerned about that stigma. I do think we're going to experience some of that. It's also, when you're communicating with people, listen to what they say, not what they don't say, which may sound odd for a therapist. But a lot of times we assume, for example, when I'm pre-COVID, when I'm talking about workplace relationships and maybe anti-harassment, what we think somebody means by the way they look very often has a not so good impact on our behavior. So something as easy as let's try to check our moods, that again involves some thought changing. There are some behaviors though, practice your faith is a big help to people's mental health. It's change your self-talk and realize you have a lot of company, and also seek positive social support.
Now, if I walk into the workplace, and let's take this dramatic scenario that I had the COVID virus and I was diagnosed positively, and I come back into the workplace and I'm fully healed now, feel like I am anyway. Do I address that with my colleagues? Do I say to them, I know you know that I was tested positively, but I am negative now. If you want to, steer clear of me for a period of time, I understand.
Gosh.
Do I put that behind me? Do I even address it? It's kind of the elephant in the room, and I've always been taught you address the elephant in the room. What do you think?
No.
No.
No. I would not do that. I wouldn't recommend that. It's going to open up a can of worms. So certainly you can, but I don't think people are going to be comfortable hearing that. I don't think there's any need for an announcement. There's also some privacy issues, so nobody can share. And I do want to assure anybody who's listening, don't think your HR manager. I hope there's some HR managers listening too, but they're limited to what they can share. So there's not going to be any broad announcement about this person tested positive for COVID. We have laws that protect that. In the United States, now, you mentioned Aruba and Curacao. It's very different there.
Yeah.
But in the United States, I would not make that announcement because it's going to frighten people.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's a good... My inclination was absolutely opposite from what you would suggest, which makes me glad that I asked the question. Another one of the things that you and I talked about was pent-up anger, the TOV, the threat of violence, as these people come back, that may have risen. Now, in the past on this show, I've interviewed people about how to react to violence in the workplace, but this is not the violence. This is the threat of violence in the workplace. And according to what I think I remember you and I discussing, was the threat of violence in the workplace is going to be increased as people come back to work. Is that correct?
Cam, a couple of weeks ago when I had an all-hands meeting, I predicted that was going to be an issue, but I really hoped I was wrong. Well, now it looks like the data is supporting that. I worked with a client recently. This was quite a pandemic-related event. Where there was somebody in their family who was threatening to harm other people and knows that there are not going to be any legal consequences for that. And in fact, there are not a lot of legal consequences right now. The jails don't know what to do with people who test positive. Certainly, if somebody needs serious help with that kind of thing, there aren't facilities that are available or equipped to handle it. I think I've gotten away from your original question, did I?
Well, it seems like as these people are coming back to work, the threat of violence is increasing. We had, due to the unknown, the uncertainty, and grief and loss, which I want to get to in a moment, your predictions, I guess, as people are coming back to work later this week and next week, on keeping their radar up for increased violence perhaps in the workplace due to so many of the things that we've already discussed.
Absolutely, and do not take any kind of threat lightly. That's so very often I hear he didn't mean it. We did, but we need to listen. We need to listen, take note, not necessarily confront anybody. I don't think that's the right answer. You go through the proper channels, but much for the same reason you don't go in and announce, "Hey, I'm positive for COVID."
When you say it that way,
there will be people who will do that, I'm sure.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Well, you're going to have your hands full in the next several months, aren't you? Maybe years, the way this thing goes out.
Besides changing the nature of the business, yes. Now, the business owner in me is you have to reinvent the whole business. Everything now has to be delivered virtually, and there are so many regulations. We're covered by HIPAA and privacy regulations, so I'm very proud of our team for getting it together and complying with the law in the space of actually a week when it all started.
Impressive what we're all capable of. Now, in my own social circle, Patty, I have people who firmly believe that this reaction our nation has taken to this virus is way overdone. In that same social circle, I have others that say we have not reacted nearly strongly enough. We have underreacted and we're all extraordinarily vulnerable. So I have these two polar opposites of friends who, when we get together, they're both trying to keep their comments in check. Everybody wants to articulate their point of view on this thing. It's certainly going to be the case later this week when people start coming back to work. You'll have people that say we shouldn't be here. You'll have others that say we should have been here 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago. Tell me how to manage that.
Well, a lot of that, I think, Cam, so much of it is regulated by workplace guidelines. So regardless of how we feel, there's certain action that we must take. And I certainly understand that people are concerned and may not feel it's time to go back to work. This is going to sound cavalier, and I don't mean it this way, but it is what it is. We have to manage what we have.
And I guess stay respectful of those that are around us and be careful of what it is that we say. Folks, the document that Patty sent me is called Stay Calm and Reduce Fear During the COVID-19 Pandemic. You can find it through the text service that we're offering. Send what's working, the word what's working, all together, no spaces, no apostrophes, to 44222. You'll find this document available from Patty as well as contact information for her. Patty, thank you so much for your help. I can see us needing to get you back on the line here before too long. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston, brought to you by Regions. We'll be right back. Listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. What's Working is brought to you by Regions, and on the line right now I've got Bill Kleinschrodt. Bill is the president and founder of Transworld Business Advisors of Mobile, and they actually, Bill, congratulations, acquired New Orleans and the Mississippi Gulf Coast territories to expand. Bill, thank you for your time. Welcome to What's Working.
Thanks for having me, Cam. Glad to be here.
Listen, I was surprised to see, and I saw this in an email from another organization, and it was after that I reached out to you, the amount of business acquisition activity. And I'm not talking about Wall Street type of deals. I'm talking about local transactions of businesses trading hands right now, and I'm wondering if you could elaborate on that and what we can expect in the near future along those same lines.
Sure, be glad to. So the CARES Act has really got some, I guess, a lot of people, just bankers in particular, clients, just across the board, just buried in this PPP loan program, which is, been really overshadowing the entire, process of this CARES Act. But there's some provisions in there from the SBA loan program that really is going to help Main Street buyers acquire businesses right now, and there's existing SBA loans that are getting some forgiveness on principal and interest for 6 months, and just a lot of benefits out there for new buyers too. So we're kind of excited about that because we really need it. There's been just, the markets really just took a pause and flatlined, and so we're excited to see what comes of it. And so there's a lot of information out there, and we're sorting through it. But I think as we get through this PPP process, we'll be seeing some more deal activity.
So imagine that I'm a business owner right now, and there's somebody that's interested in my business. Now, my last 6 weeks of revenue are not going to be reflective of things. How are you valuing businesses these days? Is it fair to even use the past 6 weeks or 8 weeks? How do you pick a price? Because I know business buyers, they're savvy. They use consultants like yourself. They're looking for a deal. And if they say, show me your revenues of the last 6 months, it's going to average in those last 6 weeks, and it's just simply not fair. What is your feedback on that?
Yeah, it's a great point, Cam. We're actually we're kind of calling this the COVID-19 recast. It's really not going to impact your business too much if you don't let it impact your business too much. I think everybody's kind of got the foresight to see that this is such a one-off, non-typical of traditional businesses. As long as the businesses have solid foundations and have some viability moving forward and going through this process, I think there's not going to be a major valuation drop. I do know the buyers initially were very trepid of finishing deals that we had kind of under contract prior to this COVID-19, and now I think we're seeing so much more activity of buyers out there searching and looking because people are just opportunistic by nature, and they see that the time to buy something is after some type of market major action and some type of perceived depression, and it's not even perceived, it's actually happening, but it's more a talking to Bill Whiston recently, and this morning actually, and we've actually heard it coined the Great Repression, which is kind of a forced, subdued period that we're in right now. And so, so there's a lot of buyer activity flowing right now, and sellers. There's a lot of tools that buyers can do to buy businesses right now, and the SBA and the CARES Act is just only one of a handful of different options.
Help me with, let's assume I'm a business buyer, and I'm considering, let's say, being a business buyer. And I've been on the sidelines for 6 weeks due to whatever reason. I may have had a job elsewhere. And I've always said to myself, I want to own a small business, or I'm tired of doing what I'm doing. This is maybe the reset, the God stop, whatever you want to say, that has allowed me to sit there and listen to myself for a while and say, now's the time. What are the questions that I, as a potential business buyer, need to ask myself that will tell me, one, am I suited to be a business owner, and two, what type of business should it be? Can you get into some of that?
Yeah, so that's another, that's some deep soul searching right there. Anything you want to get into, obviously there's a financial component of it, but I think a vast majority of small business owners truly want to buy something that they get up and it really gets them kicking in the morning, and makes them excited to be in business and do something that they enjoy. And so, yeah, there's definitely a discovery period with buyers to understand that and try to get a feel. But, there's not always things that mesh perfectly. When we're talking about an existing business market, it's somewhat timing related. It's, there's businesses that we can, try to place them in, but it just varies, to answer your question, Cam.
What about the seller? I've had 6 weeks of very low revenue. I've always said to myself, I don't know that I was cut out for this, or I've been in this for 25, 30 years. It's time to turn this over. There's got to be people out there with this idea on their mind of who is my buyer. What is the thought process of the seller?
Yeah, so the sellers right now are probably, in our experience right now, are kind of in this wait and see mode. We're seeing a lot of folks that are been interested in selling their business, and now are kind of like, they feel like they got a lot more pressure to get on and to show some performance because of their decline in revenues, and they don't want to sell when their business is not performing at an optimal amount. But I think the buyers are starting to see that we can sort through some of those businesses that aren't going to recover as fast, some of them that will, and from a seller standpoint, now's the time to be planning for it. If you're not making yourself available, it doesn't mean you have to enter into a transaction. But since there's so many buyers out there that are at a crossroads, there's a lot of unemployed people that have financial background and are financial backings to be able to purchase businesses. And now's a really good time for them to make a change in their career and do something like that. So we're seeing the market just kind of be in this, wait and see mode, but we really think that it's gonna come back with a good, because of some of these lending options. If you're a buyer, you got to go, well, how can I buy a business? I don't have millions of dollars to buy a business. Well, it doesn't take that a lot of times. It's you need some liquidity, and there's lending partners, but there's also 401k programs we can tap into that are tax-free. There's seller financing is going to be big right now to bridge the gap between some valuation differences that, maybe in the, but prior to this COVID-19, we wouldn't need to have the seller hold as much paper, but maybe that gives the assurances for the buyer to say, hey, this seller's willing to keep some skin in the game. I'll move forward with this deal because I know that the seller is going to make sure that I'm successful as we get through this, and then even beyond that.
So it sounds like if you're on the fence to buy or sell a business, there is no reason especially to wait, that there is a lot of support being thrown into the market from the SBA as well as other organizations to put you into a position to buy or sell. Would you say there's never been a better time to make a move than right now?
It certainly seems that way. I guess we'll see how it shakes out here at the end. But, in terms of interest rates, access to capital, the interest rates are just super low. I mean, you can get cheap money, and you can buy businesses that you may not think you are able to buy, but right now you really, you could get that dream business for a little cash, as little cash down as 10 to 25% of the whole purchase price, and depending on how it's structured. So, I mean, absolutely, you got interest, you got lenders waiving fees, you've got deferment of payments. Right now, and one of the provisions of the CARES Act is that the SBA will, once you close a loan, pay your first 6 months of your principal and interest. I mean, that's tens of thousands of dollars potentially. So that's a good carrot out there for people to kind of proceed in buying, to understand that they're not going to be having to pay their debt service. Of course, they have to work with their banker to make sure that they qualify for those things. But and that's part of our scope of services too, is to help them match with bankers and different SBA processes that we feel are good fits for what they their background and credit worthiness, et cetera. So,
yeah.
But we help work through that whole process, and it's just a matter of being on the lookout for things and understanding that there is a market for private businesses.
Right.
I think a lot of people don't even know that.
Yeah, and it is. And there's some for sale right now that I have made available through your website via the text service. But we just have a couple of minutes. I want to ask you one more question looking down the road. And I'm not talking about 6 weeks down the road. I'm talking about years down the road. So much in my work prior to the COVID stuff can predict what's going to happen when this massive generation of baby boomers moves on out to pasture. Those baby boomers started so many businesses to support and feed and help and supply their peer generation. What is your prediction for the baby boomers as they move on into retirement and all the businesses they've begun?
Yeah, so that is definitely what, from a macro level, that all of our industry analysis and experts we look at and try to monitor pretty closely, because that's our supply component of our market. And the baby boomers still, last numbers I heard are still representative of about 70% of the small business ownership structure. So, I mean, there's a tremendous amount of value business in terms of deals that are going to be, something's going to have to happen with them, whether they transfer internally, transfer in the open market, transfer to employees, families. So there's a lot of value there to be thinking about. The problem we find, though, is that...
Bill, got to wrap it up here. Listen, I'm going to tell people how to find you. This is Bill Kleinschrodt. He's the founder, Transworld Business Advisors. You can get the list of businesses for sale today, with certainly more to come. If you text "What's Working," no spaces, no apostrophes, to 44222, you'll find a link to that webpage, which will tell you what is available, and how to get in touch with Bill. Bill, thank you for your time. We'll be back after this break for the summary and a final word from Jeff Roberts with Yellowhammer Coffee. Thanks again, Bill. Let's wrap this thing up. I want to thank my guests today, and let's go over some of the notes that I've taken here, what I think are the most, salient points. First, from Patty Vanderpool with her EAP Lifestyle Management company. We're concerned about employee stigma of standing out and being different due to their background, perhaps their exposure to the coronavirus. We also are looking at anger, real anger, as people come back into the workplace. They're angry at the loss of time they've had. I think uncertainty creates a little bit of anger, and this new anger is leading to potentially an increased threat of violence in the workplace. And we, as workplace colleagues, want to be aware of that. We're going to be taking each other a little bit more seriously for a little while, and I want everyone to be aware of that, both yourself as well as the colleagues that you're working with around one another. Be careful of grief and loss. Now, this is something that she and I didn't get into on the air, but she and I got into prior to this. Grief and loss is often associated with the death, perhaps, or the loss in a divorce of a loved one. However, grief and loss also applies to lost opportunities and lost revenue, perhaps. These things are impacting employees as well as managers, seniors, managers and supervisors and owners. Be careful of these things as we all get going again later this week. Next, we talked to Bill Kleinschrodt. The COVID-19 reset is what he's calling it. Loans are available from the SBA. They're offering some pretty sweet deals out there. You got to work with your bankers to make sure you qualify, and that's one of the things that they'll help you with. There is increased buyer activity. Buyers are out there looking for businesses for sale. They're looking for deals. If you are on the fence about whether to sell your business, now might be the time to begin to engage in that line of thought. As a seller, you maybe feel pressured to get your revenues back up, which you always should, but there are accommodations being made for the last 6 weeks if you're concerned about that. Buyers are out there right now. They're looking for people like you, and there's lots of seller financing available right now. So, again, a lot of good content. I'm always pleased with the amount of preparation that the guests do to get on the show. Now, as you know, the final part of the show is the motivational, inspirational moment, and I read an article in AL.com earlier this week about Jeff Roberts and Yellowhammer Coffee. Jeff, thank you for your time. Welcome to What's Working.
Hey, Cam, thanks for having me.
Give me an overview first of Yellowhammer Coffee. Now, I am familiar with your product, but I know there are people that aren't. Give us an overview of what it is and how you guys have been faring since this COVID thing set in.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a coffee company that my wife and I started about 3.5 years ago. And it wasn't so much about coffee. It was more about culture. And I think culture trumps everything. So I wanted to start a business that I would love to work in. And that was the ultimate motivation for starting this company. It didn't have to be coffee. We could do it with anything. I just picked coffee because I happen to have a personal love for coffee. And so, so we started there. And, man, it's been a wild journey, as you can imagine, for the past 3.5 or so years. Yeah, I bet the past 3.5 so years. But you guys, if I understood the article correctly, you haven't seen diminished sales in the time of the COVID stuff. Is that accurate? That is accurate. And so as a leader, my first job is to, I heard you saying earlier you have two groups of friends. Your friends that kind of think this is all made up, and then your friends that think we're all going to die, right? Right, exactly. So as a leader, I have to intake all of that information, because my team built the same way. I have some of my team members that couldn't care less, and I have some of my team members that think we're all dead. You know what I mean? So I have to pull all that information together as a leader, and I have to process that. And then we have to move forward as safely and effectively as we can. And so we felt like we were just able to do it. I mean, we looked at the guidelines. We looked at the rules. I looked at the data. Data is super important. Don't make emotional decisions. Make decisions based on data. And so you just look at all that, and we felt like we could do this safely and effectively. And so I wanted safety of our customers and also safety of our team members. We have about 32 team members right now, and their safety is very, very important to me, and I want them to feel safe at work. So we just implemented policies and procedures that executed that, and so there's been a couple other local shops that have kind of had hit and miss hours, and you can wheel by kind of the major chain, and you're not really sure if they're going to be open or not. And some days they're open, some days they're not, but I think our dedication to being open in our normal hours, I mean, we've been unwavering in that effort. And I feel like our customers they know that they can count on us, and we've been there for them through this whole thing, And so anyway, it's been a wild journey, man, as you can imagine, Cam.
Where have you found the customers? I know that people, when I drive down the streets in the past couple of weeks, they've been mostly empty, but they've got to be, you're obviously finding customers. How have you done it?
Yeah, I mean, people just come to us. So we put our schedule out. We have what we call locations. So we have a main brick and mortar on Dolphin Street. We have a trailer that we run like a brick and mortar in Sims, and then we have a trailer that has been parked at Marston and me, kind of like a temporary shop. And we've had it there 6 days a week for the past couple of weeks. So we put that out on our social media presence, and people they find it, And so we've had to redo some of our processes, and we have tape in the parking lot at Marcy and me that is distanced out, 6 feet, as we should. And so it's just weird, I never in a million years thought I'd go put duct tape down and measure 6 feet and then put another line, But we've adapted. We've put out signs to kind of educate our customers on the precautions that we're taking. So it may take a minute or two longer, but again, it's all with safety in mind, and so, yeah, we've just posted on social media, and we've just seen a huge response of customers that feel comfortable enough to come purchase coffee from us.
Again, the strength of social media, it's so very powerful, folks, so very powerful. I continue to learn these lessons. I'm curious what the attitude of your customers are. If they're coming to your store, your trailer,
yes.
They're obviously in the market to buy a cup of coffee, but are they tentative? Are they hesitant? Are they just eager to gobble this stuff up?
Not at all. They're super thankful. And I'm a guy that goes around and I observe other businesses. So I've driven to many, many other drive-thru establishments, and I've been underwhelmed with their safety efforts. And I would go so far to say that we've probably been the safest of anybody I've seen in Mobile. Like, we have put the money into the gloves, in the sanitizer, in the procedures, in the policies. And I mean, again, and these are some national, well-respected chains that I've kind of been underwhelmed just as I observed them. So I've just made sure, and again, I can't control them, but I can control us. And so I've just made sure our safety is through the roof, and I think our customers have responded. They're not timid. I mean, they see the efforts we're doing, and they're like, man, like, these guys are serious. Like, they've got it together. I can't tell you how many people have texted me and said, thank you. You're the first company I've gone through that hasn't touched my credit card, and I can't tell you how safe I feel. Just simple stuff, and so,
that's great.
So the response has been overwhelmingly positive, and I can tell you this,
Jeff?
The response to our team members have been overwhelmingly positive too, because our tips have gone up tremendously, and 100% of that goes back to our team members that are making coffee at that time.
Jeff Roberts owns Yellowhammer Coffee. They got 3 locations. They're on the move as well around town, different locations. You can find them on social media. Jeff, we wish you the best of luck, folks. That brings another episode of What's Working Special Edition to a close. Listen for us tomorrow night at 6 p.m. as well as this coming Thursday at 1. We'll be back. Have a good week.